everybody, bonjour, bonjour. So I wanted to just come on and talk a little bit about why French is hard and intimidating. A lot of you have seen me posting about my French diction crash course. Hi, thanks for joining. So a lot of you have seen me posting about my French diction course, and you saw my French vowel crash course earlier on. And I wanted to come on and talk to both singers and non-singers about why French is so intimidating. Many of you speak French and are still intimidated by it, and some of the reason for that is that French doesn't sound the way it looks. So that was actually one of the conversations that I've had over and over again with students and clients who are coming to me to work on their French diction, whether spoken or sung. There are so many letters that form one sound. There are so many vowels in a row in written French that form only one spoken or sung vowel. And that's what makes French kind of intimidating. Some of the other things that I've heard, in fact, a couple of people posted questions to my story. So one of them was, I never know when to, hi there, thanks for joining. I never know when to pronounce final consonants or when to connect them to the next word or when to just keep them silent. And then another question that I get a lot, which was also submitted, is about those liaisons that we know about, those connections between words. What are liaisons? What is this thing called an elision? Are there other connections, and when do I use them? So I'm just listing all of these things that keep coming up that make French intimidating. It doesn't look the way it sounds. If you heard someone speaking it out and you had to try and transcribe it, it would be near impossible if you don't speak the language or you don't know the context. And then we have the question of those consonants, those final consonants. So it comes down to vowels and consonants. So how can I make this less intimidating for you? First of all, if you're here, and I see some of you are, thanks for joining. And if you have questions or you have things that you struggle with in French, pop them in the comments or ask me a question and I'll answer it as I can. So, first of all, there are differences between spoken and sung French, but the vowels generally are the same, whether you're speaking it or singing it. And a lot of people think that you have to manufacture these really complicated sounds and do what I call tongue acrobatics, or twist your tongue into weird positions to create a vowel sound that you're not familiar with. But actually, for singers, it's good news because all of our vowels in French are based off of Italian vowels, the language of bel canto, right? And even for speakers, you can relate it to other languages that you know, even to an extent English, although English is a wonky language with all kinds of diphthongs and pitfalls and interesting accents throughout wherever we speak English. But the good news is that you can relate your French vowels to vowels in other languages, especially Romance languages like Spanish and Italian. But Claire, what about those mixed vowels? What about that weird U sound? What about that weird sound? Don't worry. Those are what we call mixed vowels. And there are equations. What does that mean? It means you can take positions for two different Italian vowels and put them together to combine to form one new vowel. And now all I can think about is Captain Planet. So a lot of people have already talked about the Y, the U, being your tongue in an E position with your lips in an U position. That's a mixed vowel. That's an equation. And that exists for the O/, the and the OE, like in the word cud. So there are really easy ways to know exactly how to create those vowels that are healthy, sung vowels that can work with your technique. That can translate also into spoken French. If you have a healthy basis for your vowels, then you can speak French too. What do you have to figure out between spoken and sung French? The R's is a big one. So a lot of people ask me about the French R, which when you speak it is called a uvular R. And it's literally like you're gargling, whether it's salt water, Listerine, whatever you gargle. So it happens right around that little dangly buddy at the back of your mouth called the uvula. So you can practice that. You can literally practice it by gargling. Hi, Takaki. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Again, if you have any questions about French, pop them in the comments. Questions about why is it difficult? Why are final consonants pronounced sometimes and not pronounced sometimes? And I'll see if I can get to that today during the live. So we're back to the French R. The spoken one is the uvular R. However, in sung French, generally, just like our vowels, we're going to root it in the Italian. So we're going to use something called a flipped R, which is r. It's a really, really fast D sound. It's a really fast motion of the tongue. R, r, r. So if you slowed it down, it would be da, da, da. But you do it really fast on your air. R. Why? Because just like every other language that we sing in, we use the theatrical pronunciation and diction rules. So if you were to go see a play by Shakespeare in English, right? They're speaking it not only in his language, which is not our modern English, but they're speaking it in a way that allows for their voices to carry healthily to the back of a large theater space. And oftentimes they will actually roll their R's, which we don't do in English, unless you're Scottish, which my mom is. So the same thing happens in French. The tradition started where people would roll their R's in the Italian way. And that's continued to today because it projects better. If you start doing that uvular R, which gets you stuck in the back of your throat, sometimes that pulls your entire vocal mechanism backward. And what does that mean? That means that you start speaking in a woofy place. And that kind of sound doesn't project to the back of the hall. It will throw off the alignment of your beautiful Italian vowels, which need a mix of what we call chiaro scuro, bright and dark. We will only have the dark, which is sort of like you're speaking into your hand and it doesn't project. So the reason we often still do the flipped R in sung French, even for art song and aria, is to make sure that it projects to the back of the hall and that your vowel placement can stay in a balanced placement. So it still projects and still has that beautiful warmth to your entire voice instead of speaking back here. There are songs where we will try to use the uvular R. Generally, if you have practiced the uvular R and you feel incredibly comfortable with it and you feel that it's not throwing off your alignment, you could sing art songs that were written anywhere from Poulenc to today using the uvular R. But again, you really have to practice it because otherwise it's going to throw you off and immediately it's going to make people realize that you are not a French speaker. So if you are a speaker of French who's learning how to speak in French and you're not worrying too much about projecting, the way that you can practice that R is to take some form of liquid, doesn't really matter what, as long as it's maybe not carbonated, and trying to gargle. And what that does is it unlocks that uvula and unlocks the soft palate to allow that roll to happen while sound is still being created. If it's here, you're literally closing your throat and you can't make sound anymore. But that's the way to practice it. Gargle. Gargle, gargle, gargle. Thanks for those of you who are joining us. If you have any questions about French or things that you struggle with or things you're curious about with French, feel free to throw them in the comments. So we've talked about vowels and how they're based in Italian and how there are equations for those mixed vowels. And we've talked about the uvular R. So let's now talk about the liaison, the connections between words. There are very specific rules about these connections. There is a category about liaison where they are absolutely mandatory. And those tend to be words that are closely related, aka there's a word that is describing another. An adjective is describing a noun. Those are closely related, so you would connect them. Or if you have a noun that's followed by a verb, you would probably connect them. So, and then there's an entire category of liaison that are forbidden. You would never ever do. So if it's after a singular noun, no liaison. I'm not going to get into the huge list of these, but I have created what I call a connection flow chart in PDF form that you can reach out to me about that will give you a guideline. You're starting with this text. You've looked into your translation. You know what grammar is happening. You know what words are nouns. You know what words are adjectives. You know what word is a verb. Then you can go through this flow chart and it's going to tell you whether or not to connect, and if so, how. So let's back up a tiny bit. You've all heard of liaison, I'm guessing, partially because the word of the movie and the play, Dangerous Liaisons, right? So it means connection, literally, linking up to something else. So liaison is when a final consonant, one of those pesky final consonants that is normally silent, becomes voiced. So a silent final consonant becomes voiced in connection to the next word. That's what a liaison is. Then you have something called an elision. An elision is another kind of connection, but what it does is the word that is connecting to the next word ends in a schwa, and the next word starts with a vowel. We're going to talk about the schwa in a second because that's another sticking point. So it ends in a schwa, connects to a word that begins with a vowel or a mute H. And what happens in that connection is we say, it's way too much faff to pronounce the schwa and the vowel that follows. So let's just eliminate that schwa. So that's the way I have my students and clients remember what an elision is. In an elision, we are eliminating the schwa. So that final schwa disappears. So for example, my name is Claire. In French, it would be pronounced Claire. In spoken French, you can hear I do that uvular R. There's the tiniest bit of a little bit of a vowel called a shadow vowel in diction and in sung diction, which tells you that I have spoken a consonant. I have sounded a consonant. Claire, right? Tiny, tiny, tiny little vowel. If I were to follow my name with the verb aimer, the word to love, Claire loves something, ice cream, probably. As I spoke or sung it, I would get rid of the schwa, because otherwise, listen to what happens. Claire aime. I have to put in a glottal stop. We do it a lot in English, we do it a lot in German, and what it is the vocal cords going bam, we're starting to make sound. And because French is a legato language, we don't want that abrupt bam of a glottal stop to come into the line. So you could sing Claire aime. Hi, Nicolas. Claire aime, but hear how difficult that is and how much you need to move around in your vowel to create it. So what normally happens and what composers normally do is eliminate that schwa, so you hear Claire aime, Claire aime. The schwa disappears and we go straight to the vowel of the next word. So that's an elision. We've eliminated a schwa to make our lives easier, because that does happen in French. The French have found ways to make the language more legato, to flow more easily off the tongue, because it is that beautiful inflected flowing river of a language. Oh, we have a choir singer. That's great. Do you have any questions about French, Nicolas? I'd love to hear them. So, elision, liaison. There is one final connection that I have read about multiple times, for example, in Thomas Grubb's Singing French, and his protege Eileen Davis Sing French, which I use in a lot of my courses, and they talk about another connection called a normal linkage. The normal linkage is any consonant that is at the end of a word that would be pronounced no matter what, in any case, any situation, links up to the next word. It's a good reminder for us as singers and as speakers of French to remember that that consonant is in fact pronounced no matter what. But the times that it can be helpful is when you have a word ending in RS, RF, RD, or RT. That's a group of words that are unusual. Those words ending in RF, RD, RT, RS are interesting because that final consonant is actually silent. That consonant that is pronounced at the end of the word is the R. So for example, I put up a pronunciation challenge based around a Reddit video the other day that had all of these words that sounded the same, homophones, but were spelled differently. Un verre, 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 sans verre, verre, un verrier, verre, 20 heures. So I'm flipping my R like I would in sung French. But the important thing is that many of these words that sound the same are spelled differently. Un verre, verre. The first verre is V-E-R. The second is V-E-R-T, but that final consonant is not pronounced. Verre, sans, verre, verre, that one is V-E-R-R-E. Verre, verrier, verre, V-E-R-S. So these R-S, R-D, R-T, R-F. The R is the pronounced consonant. So what happens with the normal linkage is it's a good reminder that that final other consonant is not pronounced, but the R will link to the beginning of the next word. All this to say that there are actually 3 different types of connections in French, and that I have a flow chart that would help you make decisions about it. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and contact me, or you can join my French Diction crash course, which begins tomorrow and runs for 6 weeks, which I'll talk more about later because I want to talk more about French. But if you are interested, go to the link in my bio and you can sign up for a call to chat about what the course is and how it works. So 3 different types of connections. Now, I also mentioned that I would talk about the schwa. I'm going to post a picture after we're done with this live today. It's a little drawing by someone who does coffee art monsters, and I fell in love with this particular one and have decided to name him Monsieur le Schwa, just so that he embodies something for you. Now, the schwa is a vowel that is inherently unaccented in the French language. So I already mentioned my name in French is Claire. So you heard that teeny tiny what I called shadow vowel after my R. And in some French, just because of that theatrical nature and needing to project to the end of the hall, wherever that was, whether it was similar to the Globe Theatre, whether it was La Comédie Française, whether it is the Opéra Bastille, the Opéra Garnier, the Met, the Chicago Lyric, which is a massive theater, the sound needed to project to the end of the hall, so it couldn't just be that tiny shadow vowel anymore. It became set to music and elongated, unlike spoken French. This again is the theatrical French. So my name sung would be Claire. So we have a schwa that is now sung. I hope you're staying safe too. Thank you. So how do you sing the schwa? The most important thing, as I said, is that the schwa is unaccented. So that means that you need to find a way to accent the syllable that comes before the schwa. So if you were singing a line, let's go with Claire loves ice cream. In French, that would be Claire aime la glace. Okay, so glace ends with a schwa, aime ends with a schwa, Claire ends with a schwa. And so in the French language, I mentioned it's inflected. It's a flowing river. We want to aim our energy to the second to the last syllable if there's a schwa involved. So, Claire aime la glace. I want to go to glace. So if I were to sing that, Claire aime la glace. So even if that schwa is long, the energy and the inflection of the phrase goes towards glace. Glace. So that schwa is unaccented. So you need to find ways to accent the preceding syllable. so that that schwa does not get accented. The other reason the schwa is important is because of rhyme scheme and poetic meter. So just like in Shakespeare's texts, for example, he often used iambic pentameter. I know you are all now having flashbacks to high school English, but think about the way that he wrote. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. Ba 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 ba. In that case, there are 5 lulls and 5 crests. Okay? In French, there wasn't necessarily that ba 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 because it's an inflected language, meaning it's unstressed, meaning we're going with the flow of the river to energize towards the end of the phrase. But we were still thinking about number of syllables in a line. Okay? So just like in the Shakespeare, we had 10 syllables in the line, or if you think about a haiku, it's 575, I think, and I'm probably wrong, whoops. But there were similar rhyme patterns and poetic meters in French. So you had to have the right number of syllables, and schwas often played a role in that. So that's why composers set schwas to music on top of the fact that the sound had to carry to the back of a big theater. So there's the schwa semi-demystified. And the last thing I'll say about the schwa is that you want to form it like one of the mixed vowels, actually. So I mentioned there are equations that the U is formed by an E and an U at the same time. So an E tongue position and an U lip position. U. So the schwa is similar to the OE sound. The equation for that, sorry, it's breezy here in Baltimore. The equation for that is a nice tall in your tongue and an open in your lips. So that is your OE vowel. And your schwa is based off of that shape and just remains unaccented. So one of my favorite little tips about that, and I talked about this in my free vowel crash course, is the idea of a very proper British person saying dear, my dear. So it's that last little sound, that last little end of the vowel, that last little diphthong. And you want to make sure, again, that you're not doing acrobatics from one vowel to the next, because then the vowel would become accented. If I went dia, all of a sudden the sound is accented. So I want to think dia, how little can I move my tongue to still shift to a slightly different, more neutral sound, so that that sound is still heard but not accented, and the more important vowel gets its highlighted time. So that's a brief foray into the schwa. So yes, it is true that French doesn't look the way it sounds. There are quite a few groups of vowels that create one sound. But there's a way to start decoding it. You start to see the patterns. You start to learn the vowel groups that are specific sounds. And what I do is I teach those group sounds, those group spellings, and we practice the pronunciations in multiple different contexts. And then the other thing that you'll realize as we start going through the French language and as you start becoming more familiar with it is that they actually are, as I said, trying to find ways to make the language more legato and flowing and to make it easier actually for the speaker or the singer. So as you start to form your French vowels based off of your beautiful sung Italian vowels that you probably learned first, and as you start to speak it based off of pure vowels from other Romance languages or vowels that you can base in your own native language, whatever that is, whether it's English or otherwise, you start to get clarity on the vowels. Then you start to learn the spellings of the vowels and you know exactly which vowel to sing when. And then you start to learn the rules around what the French are doing to make it easier to pronounce them back to back. So there's something called vocalic harmonization, which I'm not going to talk too much about, but that makes it easier to speak or sing distinct vowels back to back. They start to work together, just like dia dia isn't dia, right? So we're avoiding all of those acrobatics of the tongue. And then you start to learn the connection rules, and those help you continue to identify when final consonants are pronounced and when they're not. And you can use my handy dandy connection flow chart to decide what kind of connection it is and what that means for your final consonant. So it's all about decoding and breaking things down, and then finding the way that it most beautifully and healthily sits in your voice, either spoken or sung, to make sure you could speak it or sing it for days on end. And then it's realizing that the text is the most important thing in French. The French are incredibly proud of their beautiful language, and they cultivate it and they focus on how to highlight it in any situation. So that means that we as interpreters, whether we're speaking or singing, get the job of falling in love with the beauty of the language too, and finding ways to highlight it. So oftentimes people say, wow, French is so beautiful, it's so legato, but it's so delicate, and it's so almost borderline precious that I don't know how to be emotive with it. And what you often notice is that people who are trying to sing in French are focusing only on the vowel sounds, and they forget about consonants. And if you only have vowels in a language, you don't have the language. We start to lose the beautiful poetry and the beautiful storytelling and the beautiful imagery that the poets used. So I would encourage you, as you're working on your spoken and sung French, to, yes, figure out the vowels that are healthiest for you. Yes, decode the vowels into those base Italian vowels. And yes, work on nasalizing your vowels, but make sure that it's at a healthy place for you. And then make sure that you are still using your consonants so that we hear that gorgeous text, so that you feel you can be emotive using the text in the way that you would in other languages, while still riding that raft down the flowing river and keeping your energy going towards the end of the phrase. Because the more you do that, the more it sounds French, the more we feel the flow of the language, and the flow, that expressive kind of pull of the language down the river is what gives French its expressive quality. It's not like English where we accent. Forsooth, I know not why I am so sad. And it's not like Italian where we have those similar stresses. The pull comes from that, how am I going to get myself to that final phrase while just giving all the energy I can and keeping the language, the vowels, the consonants, the connections all on that river. So that's why French is difficult. It's different than other languages in many, many ways, but it also relates and connects to other languages in many ways that allow us to have access points, that allow us to be able to decode in a way that is not completely foreign to us. And we start to understand the flow of the language, which allows us to understand the composers of the language, both spoken and sung. You could think about Molière, you could think about the poets, you could think about novel writers, anything like that, even people who are writing in Le Monde and things like that, and politicians as they speak. You start to understand why they phrase things the way that they do, why the language flows the way that it does, but you still have access points. And I'm here to help you with those. So if you're interested in working on your sung French specifically, I will at some point offer a spoken French course. So if you're interested in working on your sung French this summer, we start tomorrow. It is a 6-week-long course. We will have group classes that are interactive once a week, talking about different topics, deep diving into these access points that I've mentioned, into these vowels, the connections, the consonants, all kinds of other things like the schwas, the glides, and then really delving into the poetic meter to understand the flow, that river I keep talking about. And on top of that, we'll be talking about repertoire that suits your voice. We'll be doing individual coachings. We'll also have a Facebook community where we're listening to different recordings of both spoken and sung French. We're also going to be talking about composers. I'm going to spotlight a composer each week and give you a playlist to check out some of their compositions as well as people that influence them. So you get exposed to all of this amazing French literature, and you get to start finding those access points, finding ways to decode, finding ways to make it healthy for your voice, and finding ways to be expressive with French. And there will be masterclasses with myself and my beloved colleague and friend Barbara Kitts, who is a native French speaker and a fabulous singer and a French melody specialist, because not every native French speaking opera singer is a French specialist, believe it or not. Her passion is mélodie and chanson, and so we will be there to work with you on those access points, those decoding, on that river of French, and finding the repertoire that sits beautifully for your voice that you can express yourself through. So if you are interested in that, go ahead and check out the link in my bio. Click on it, look around at the program, see what you think. If you're interested, go ahead and set up a call and we can talk about what tier might suit you best, what your needs are, or if you're just interested in trying out an individual coaching with me, feel free to reach out via message. And if you do have any questions come up throughout your time as you start to get more and more exposed to French, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. I am a massive nerd. I love learning new things. I love talking about new repertoire, and I love finding ways to help people decode French and stop avoiding it. Because so many people get intimidated by it that they just avoid it as much as possible. They try not to sing any French as they go through grad school or as they go through their professional careers even. So open up this entire world of incredible vocal repertoire. It's easier than you think it is because you already have the tools to get inside the language and to understand it. You just need a little bit of guidance on decoding and finding those equations and finding that river flow, and I'm here to help you with that. So with that, thank you very much for checking in today on a Sunday during this very strange time in our world. I hope all of you are staying safe. I hope all of you are making your voices heard in a time where we need so much to speak out and to sing out. So thank you again. Merci beaucoup. I hope to speak to some of you. I hope to stay in touch with many of you, all of you. And thank you, Nicolas, for tuning in as a French person. I would love any insights you have about what I've said today or anything that you might want to add to what I've said today. Et si vous voulez parler en français, je serai ravie. And Chris, I'd love to talk to you about your own Instagram Live and becoming a guest on that. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I'll leave this up for the rest of the day. If you're interested again in that 6-week French course where you'll come out on the other side a total master and ready to prepare much of your own repertoire on your own without going immediately to a coach, then check out that link and go ahead and schedule a call with me. I have so enjoyed getting to know so many people and their needs for French and their values and the repertoire that they're working on or that would suit them ideally, and seeing them develop and be able to tackle that and to start presenting it. So that is my passion, and I'm here to do that for all of you. Again, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, and make your voices heard. Thank you again. Merci. Au revoir.